Sup Team KBA, One Tech Traveler here. This is Last Shelter. You're joining me in the second part of the new SX Heroes that was announced over the weekend. I broke it down into two videos just to make it easier for you to switch between the heroes that you're interested in learning about. And because they were quite long, as we had a lot to talk about, deep dived into their skill sets and kind of speculating or reading between the lines of what they might end up looking like. So check out the video for Retrograder Blaze Water. Seemed really interesting, was a nice refreshing change, and kind of fills in some of the gaps with the versatility that he can play across all the troops. The hero we're talking about in this video is Lust, Angelina Grace. We're on the Last Shelter blog page where they made the announcements, read through all the skill sets, and then make some commentary along the way to see what they sound like, whether I think there's any sort of promising parts or any potential like flags of where they might have some weaknesses or anything like that. So most of the details are pretty light. It's mostly on the wordy side, so nothing on the skill activation percentages, what type of skills they are, whether they're status, prep, combat, and also what numbers they are doing in regards to if they are doing any healing, damage, like reduction, anything like that. But should be a lot of fun. Always nice when there's new heroes into the mix, and outside of, you know, the hero drop rhythms, this should be quite a nice casual discussion where we can talk about it. So let me know down in the comments what you think of Lust, Angelina Grace, as we're talking through, and where you think she might be best placed, what heroes you might think would complement her well, and overall just what you think of her. So let's dive into Lust, Angelina Grace. Now, Angelina appears to be the owner of a high-end entertainment venue, but in fact she is an assassin. She's ambitious, sexy, and seductive, like a thorny rose. Maybe they didn't need to throw that in there, just keep her as ambitious, sexy, and seductive. Behind her back are the mechanical wings, especially made for her by mercenaries named Muse. Interesting backdrop context that they always provide. I always find there's just literally little relevance in what sort of personality we can glean for her. Retrograder was interesting, kind of relevant. Heroes, you can kind of talk anything from her. Like, I think the design again is sweet. They've done a great job. It's kind of a nice mix of her having some nice visual appeal, but also badass thrown into the mix, the big one being her mechanical wing. Whereas I liked Retrograder's axe, but not necessarily his pose and maybe his like overall like clothing design. Thought they could have played more in that. Like Death Rider has more of a hazmat like gas mask than what, you know, Retrograder does, being a firefighter when he's just like half naked. But Lust looks really, really dope. I like her design. Again, she's giving me sort of like Falcon, Wonder Woman vibes thrown together. So maybe that's the rationale behind, who knows. But she has a lot of uniqueness into her when you compare to the other ladies out there. Definitely a lot more like outlandish and more eccentric with her designs compared to, say, Tech Priestess, Canoness, Prophets, that are a bit more toned down in their like outfit choices. I think Lust looks pretty cool and definitely looks like the, you know, seductive description that they've noted. But as a hero, I think she looks dope. Types of troops: shooters. So she is specialized for shooters. Hero positioning: damager, ranged. Looks to be in the back row, unless you're going very heavy like offensive APC, pairing Hummingbird, a Nomad, anything, then we'll see if she could be a potential in the mid, but most likely she'll be in the back row as an alternative to those heroes. Faction: mercenaries. Again, don't really know what that means, but hey, adds more context, I guess. A closer look to her weapon, being... Now, one thing I'll say, she's not your typical assassin, especially with a mechanical wing, when assassins tend to be a bit more ninja, stealthy, or just in the shadows. I guess she could be creating shadows flying in the air if that mechanical wings work. It's only, is it one wing? Sephiroth vibes from Final Fantasy VII, that's what I thought. Anyway, the weapon, the mysterious assassination weapon, small but has a very high fertility rate. Small knives making small knives. Has a very high fatality rate. Mysterious, not really, you know, it's kind of a small dagger weapon, shuriken, like any small thing you can keep in the mix. Mysterious in the way you can hide it, probably. Very high fatality rate. I guess anything can have a very high fatality rate if you're hiding it, but I digress. I'm a bit too critical. I do like Lust, but yeah, just sort of the rationale and logic behind. Wings, the mechanical wings specially made for her by mercenaries named Muse. That was just a copy of the text above. Doesn't really show much from that close-up, but this one, yeah, I like the wing design, looks very cool. And then finally, of course, we get to the meaty skill introduction. So, second skill, Poisoned Blade. There is a probability to cause a certain amount of damage to 2 enemy random teams and cause them to enter a poison state. This looks to be a combat skill. It could also be a passive, I guess we'll find out. Having a probability, this looks like it will have quite a high certainty based on how frequent other heroes sort of recurring hits are, like, you know, Venom Walker, Scarlet Siren, her having like guaranteed set turns, whereas this one's just more on the, looks like a high activation rate. It does depend on the damage number. If it's a very high damage number, then I would also see that probability going down. But again, it could be twofold. We'll see later on. It could go either way, and causes them to enter a poison state. There will be an associated percentage to go with that for the damage, whether it's big or small. Also the number of turns that lasts for. If it's around 2 turns, that's better. It doesn't indicate any sort of stacking state, so it's, yeah, gonna kind of depend when it activates and triggers for this to go. Looks okay. It's kind of your consistent damage. My immediate flags are this is going to trigger like regular healing frequencies from Tech Priestess, kind of is what Venom Walker's like down for when he's up against Tech Priestess. Those numbers do very low and she is just gonna recover much. So that's kind of my current flag. But of course, shooters, you tend to want to counter to vehicles. Vehicle healing, yeah, that could work. Kami, Heaven's Redemption, they're not really on a damage basis. Maybe besides Crusher, but to be honest, so that could work. But again, if you want mixed APCs, it's more of the healing as a counter for poison state. It really depends how that's set up. Not bad otherwise. I like that it's a 2 enemy random teams, whether it has a higher target, whether it has a higher range to reach the back row or is limited to the front and the mid. Not bad, not great, not sort of too different than what we've seen, but an alternative for the shooter setups we have with Hummingbird and Nomad, kind of going a little bit towards Executioner's setup with her like Burning Flames, with her Heaven Smite. 5th skill, Feathers of Seduction. I like the sound of that. 1 turn prep, a probability of causing high damage. So note that they say high damage. In the 2nd skill they said certain amount of damage, so that leads me to believe 2nd skill is going to be a low damage, high frequency, or even 100% trigger rate, and then having that associated poison state. High damage, yeah, this is going to be a key one for dealing that major damage output. 1 turn prep, 2 enemy random teams, causing them to enter a confused state for round. So you not only have poison state now, you also have a confused state to stack those status effects alongside them. That's actually very good. recollection, we don't have any damage dealers that deal confusion, at least not for shooters anyway. Yeah, Rose Noir doesn't, Betray doesn't, Makeshift Back Row doesn't, Nomad, Hummingbird, they don't. So this is actually nice. It's kind of akin to like Countdown for Vehicles and her being the unique hero with the troop recovery block as a damage dealer. This is a nice mix, so I like it. Confused State, very good, not relying on others to sort of trigger where the enemy can hit themselves. It is only for 1 round, so yeah, if you don't have another hero to add that additional confusion, then it really depends on the order, the percentage related to that confusion state. But hey, I like it. Adds a bit of counter in there, and a very solid one too that can't be easily negated. This is not going to be effective against Death Rider, who has that immunity status for all kinds of counters in the back row. It can affect Huntress and Captain Ivanov just as a direct, but of course it depends on the other heroes at play. I like it so far. Kind of seems to me it may be around 30% range. 40% would be quite nice. If it's a high frequency as a 1-turn prep, then I would like this a lot, especially if it's a high damage enter to enemy teams. Not bad. I think one of the better, currently one of the nicer skills of Lust. And then finally, 8th skill, Featherstorm. All squads are immune to confuse twice. When it is their turn to act, they will cause high damage to the enemy squad in the control effect each round. Now this probably is going to be the in my opinion, her best skill. The fact how she provides a blanket immunity to the confusion state for the whole formation is big. This will probably be a prep or status skill that is automatically from the turn of battle. How often? This will, depending on who you are up against, this skill can probably be consumed quite early. So I like that it's confusion twice. So it provides 2 chances for each the front, mid, and her. And when it's their turn to act, they will also provide high damage. I'm assuming this is going to be the heroes in your formation. So when they attack, this is going to provide an extra damage on top of whatever your hero wants to execute. I could be wrong. I guess we'll find out when they're a bit more specific, because of course this is all just speculation, reading in between the lines. But this could be nice. We don't know whether that high damage is also as a relation to if they try to apply confused state, or whether this is just from that skill providing it regardless if the enemy tries to use confusion on these on our heroes. Overall, it's all right. Again, it really depends on the numbers. If the high damage ends up translating into high numbers, that would be good. I would say, yeah, it's got a nice mix of consistent damage and high damage. We'll see how the overall numbers stack when you compare it to Nomad and Hummingbird. Hummingbird being more of the very high, like high damage numbers, and maybe not to the tune of hers. Nomad being very good on his consistent damage, more focused with basic attacks. She could be anywhere from below the potency of Nomad and Hummingbird or in between them. But yeah, in terms of, so I think she'll be good. So I think she will be a nice mix to the overall shooter back row. It just, again, depends on her numbers. And then, you know, who you put around her. She's definitely more focused on the all-out damage, and I like that she provides some support to your mid and your front row so they don't get confused. Obviously my kind of flags would be against healing APCs. Again, if her damage does very well, then it can sort of overpower healing either frequencies or just the amount of healing that happens from, say, Kami, Crusher, Heaven's Redemption on the like countering vehicles. But even against fighters, I think she could also be very well on that. The only thing I don't like, the only thing that you can see there is a counter is her poison state. Similar with Scarlet Sirens, like burning state or just anything that is regularly hitting but low damage is always going to provide a Tech Priestess a chance to heal more, since that's how her healing is set up. Confusion be very good against very high damage APCs, and but yeah, nothing too different or too unique about her. I think Retrograder kind of shows much more interesting skills, especially with his versatility. But then again, I do like that we have another back row damage dealer for shooters, just to give a bit more variation with the combos and sort of, you know, play styles that we had from Nomad, that we had from Hummingbird. I still feel like shooters were kind of undermined a little bit, and not as generally as powerful as, say, for vehicles, with how useful they are and their damage and their skills, and also fighters just being insanely with their high healing. I kind of want to see shooters having much more high damage dealt, so she is welcome to that addition. Of course, we also have Rose Noir as well. If her numbers are low, it's going to be a bit underwhelming, but again, very open. I think she looks interesting and shows promise. It's just down to how well she executes now. So that is her 3 skills. And finally, the developers take on her analysis. Second skill has a good damage ability and can add a poisonous state to the target. The 5th skill not only increases damage but also has a confusing effect. Now that's interesting. There's a probability, there's nothing about increasing the damage. So unless they've kind of left that out in the wording, maybe there's like a stack or damage increase from triggering. We'll see. That would be nice if it does, to really bolster her like damage effect. And again, is a nice sort of counter to the very heavy damage dealers, or, you know, Huntress, Death Rider, Captain Ivanov. And then the 8th skill can make all of our teams have good anti-confusion ability. Agreed. I think that's super strong. Probably is the strongest like anti-confusion sort of setup. We have ones that apply confusion. We don't have too many that have a direct counter, unless it's just a blanket immunity, like, you know, Death Rider, Glutton, with the Clarity States for the back row. I think Glutton would be interesting as a mixed APC combination with her, just how we kind of have like Glutton TP Hummingbird. She will benefit from his immunity status, and then strengthen the stable damage and survivability of the team. Strengthening the stable damage, just, yeah, survivability just means there's a bit more balance across the rows rather than one APC like really taking heavy effect. And I believe, yeah, and because 8th skill looks like it will already activate, then yeah, could be nice. Again, it's not a blanket, so they can still be countered with other things like disarm, silencing. So whether you want another hero in the mid to sort of like provide greater immunity coverage, or, yeah, just depends on how that triggers and who it hits. Deflecting damage to the enemy in addition to her having high damage potential. And match the control type heroes, which can cause very strong and stable damage to the enemy group. So that's it for Lust, and I think should be pretty good. let's just wait and see when they finally roll her out. So that is Lust. Thanks for joining me on the commentary and deep dive into her, seeing what she looks like. My initial thoughts based on the wording, again, just pure speculation. We'll see how much of that actually holds and how much of that is just completely not true with the output. It does look like they could be holding back some key details, so we may see a bit more fleshed out skill effects in addition to the all damage that she provides. She could be pretty combat skill heavy, generally not surprising for back row damage dealers, with the exception of a few like Death Rider, Captain Ivanov, and I believe Huntress. They kind of have more passive skills in the back, but everywhere else high frequency of combat skills, so having her protected in the back is probably the best suited. Yeah, exciting, not bad. 2 new SX heroes, Retrograder, Lust. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. And yeah, like always, and like I mentioned with Retrograder, making up her hero profile, putting in information that we do know, and then filling it in once things are official. If you have any comments or any of your thoughts, anything down below, let me know. That wraps up the video. If you liked it, give it a big thumbs up. If you haven't yet, join the Team KBA community by subscribing to my YouTube channel, and check out onetechtraveler.com for more stories, articles, and videos around tech, travel, and gaming. I'll see you in the next one, but until then, keep being awesome. Peace.